Have you ever carried a pain so long it felt like the air itself was heavier? Like every breath dragged an old wound along with it. I know that weight. I lived inside it for years after my brother Theo passed. The house stayed quiet, the phone stayed silent, and the space he left behind grew colder every season. Then, one ordinary Sunday afternoon changed everything. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Damien. My nephew. Theo's only son. We weren't close. Life had pulled us in opposite directions the day the funeral ended. I almost let it ring out, but something made me answer. "Hey, Aunt Nora," his voice came through, careful, almost fragile. "I've been thinking about you a lot. Can I call you later? I think I need to say something." I stared at the screen long after the message ended. "I've been thinking about you." 6 simple words, yet they landed in my chest like warm rain on frozen ground. I hadn't realized how much I missed being thought of until that moment. Later, when he actually called, I was sitting in the same armchair Theo used to fall asleep in. The refrigerator hummed. Sunlight faded across the living room walls. Everything felt suspended. "Aunt Nora," he started, then stopped. A long breath. "I'm sorry." 2 words, cracked right down the middle. Sorry? For what? He hadn't done anything wrong. I waited. "I'm sorry I disappeared when you needed family most," he said, voice rushing now, like he was afraid the courage would run out. "After Dad died, I shut down. I left you to carry everything alone. I was hurting, but that's no excuse. I should have been there. I wasn't. And I hate that I wasn't." The room blurred. I pressed a hand to my mouth so he wouldn't hear the first sob escape. All these years I told myself the distance was mutual, safer that way. Hearing him name it, hearing him carry guilt for the same silence I carried, broke something open inside me. "Damien," I finally managed, voice trembling. "I didn't know how to reach you either. I was drowning too." He let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like relief. "I don't want to keep carrying this alone anymore," he said softly. "I don't want us to keep carrying it alone." We stayed on the phone for almost 2 hours. We didn't fix everything. We didn't have to. We just let the years of quiet hurt spill out between us, word by word, tear by tear. By the time we hung up, the stone in my chest had shifted, just a little, lighter than it had been in years. A few weeks later, he called again. This time there was something different in his voice, something nervous, almost hopeful. "Nora, there's something I've been wanting to ask you about Dad, something I never understood. But I'm scared it's going to hurt too much to hear the answer." My heart stuttered. Whatever he needed to know, I wasn't sure I was ready to give it to him. But I already knew I would. That second call came on a rainy evening. I remember the soft drumming on the windows, the way the streetlights blurred gold across wet glass. Damien's name appeared on the screen again, and my stomach tightened with both dread and longing. "Hey," he said, quieter than before. Wind moved through the phone, like he was walking somewhere open and empty. "I've been thinking about Dad all week. I can't shake it." I closed my eyes, pressed the phone closer. "Tell me." A long pause. I always thought he was unbreakable, you know? The man who fixed everything, never complained. But lately I keep wondering, was he lonely? Did he ever feel like he had to carry everything alone, the way we do now? The question pierced straight through me, because I knew the answer. Theo had carried more than any of us ever saw. He was, I began, then stopped. My throat felt raw. He was lonely, Damien. He just never let us see it. He thought if he admitted he was tired, we'd all fall apart. Damien's breath shook. I found some of his old notebooks when I was clearing the attic. Letters he never sent. One of them was addressed to me. He wrote that he was proud of me, but scared I'd grow up thinking love had to be silent, to be strong. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. Theo had died believing his son never needed his softness. I wish I could tell him he was wrong, Damien whispered. I needed it. I still do. We sat in silence for a long time, just listening to each other breathe across the miles. Then, almost too soft to hear, I want to come see you. Not just for phone calls. I want to sit at your kitchen table and talk until we run out of words. Would that be okay? My heart answered before my voice could. You don't ever have to ask, sweetheart. This house has been waiting for you. He laughed, a small, wet sound of relief. Next weekend, then. I'll drive. Up Friday after work. After we hung up, I walked through every room, touching the walls, the furniture, the ghosts. I changed the sheets in the guest room, even though he'd probably sleep on the couch like when he was little. I bought fresh coffee and the cinnamon cookies he used to steal from the jar. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since I was a young woman waiting for a first date. Friday evening came too slowly and too fast. At exactly 7:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there he was, taller than I remembered, hair damp from rain, holding a small duffel and a look that said he was terrified I might change my mind. I didn't. I pulled him into a hug that lasted longer than any we'd ever shared, even when he was small. He buried his face against my shoulder for a second, just like he did the day of the funeral, only this time he let himself tremble. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes were red. I brought something, he said, voice rough. He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn leather journal, Theo's journal. My breath caught. I think, Damien said, we should read it together. But only if you're ready. I looked at that journal in his shaking hands and felt every unsaid thing between us rise like a tide. Was I ready? I didn't know. But I knew we couldn't heal around it anymore. We had to go through it. We sat at the kitchen table under the warm glow of the pendant light, the same table where Theo used to do the crossword every Sunday. Rain tapped the windows like it was trying to get in and listen. Damien laid the journal between us like it was made of glass. The leather cover was cracked, the edges soft from years of being carried in pockets and glove compartments. I ran my thumb over Theo's initials burned faintly into the corner. You open it, I whispered. He shook his head. We do it together. So we did. Page after page of my brother's private handwriting, small, careful, surprisingly neat. Grocery lists mixed with sudden lines of poetry. Appointments. Then, halfway through, the journal, the entries changed. I can't sleep again. Damien is growing so fast, and I'm terrified I'm teaching him the wrong things. That strength means never asking for help. That love has to be quiet or it's weak. I don't want him to inherit my silence. I had to stop reading aloud. Damien took over, voice thick. He was proud of you, Nora. Every birthday, every holiday, he wrote about how you held the family together when Mom got sick. He said you were the brave one. He never told you because he thought you already knew. Tears fell onto the pages. We didn't bother wiping them away. Near the end, dated just 2 weeks before the accident, Theo had written a letter he never sent, addressed to both of us. If anything ever happens to me, don't let my boy grow up believing he has to be an island. Tell him it's okay to need people. Tell him I needed both of you more than I ever said, and tell my sister I'm sorry I made her carry so much alone. She deserved better than my pride. Damien's shoulders started shaking. I reached across the table and took his hand. He turned his palm up and held on like he was drowning. I didn't know, he kept saying. I didn't know he saw me. I didn't know he was proud. I pulled him into my arms right there at the table, the journal still open between us. We cried the way only people who have lost the chance to say, I love you in time can cry, loud, messy, healing. After a while, the storm inside quieted. We made tea. We left the journal open so Theo could sit with us. Hours passed. We talked about everything we'd been afraid to say for years. How I'd been angry at Damien for disappearing. How he'd been angry at me for not chasing him. How we'd both been angry at Theo for leaving, then felt guilty for it. At some point, Damien looked at me, eyes swollen but clear. "I don't want to go back to the way it was," he said. "I don't want separate lives anymore." I squeezed his hand. "Then don't." He stayed the whole weekend. We cooked together, burned the garlic bread, laughed until we cried again. On Sunday night he packed slowly, like he was trying to stretch time. As I walked him to the door, he stopped on the porch. "I have one more thing," he said, and pulled a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was a single photograph. Theo, Damien, age 6, and me, all laughing in the backyard, sun flared and golden. On the back, Theo had written in faded pen, "My whole world in one frame." Damien's voice was barely a whisper. "I want to come back next weekend." And the one after, "I want Sunday dinners again. I want family." I couldn't speak. I just nodded and pulled him into one more hug. He drove away, taillights disappearing into the dark. I stood on the porch a long time, holding that photograph against my heart. But the story wasn't finished. There was still one secret I hadn't told him. A letter Theo wrote to me alone, hidden in the very last page of the journal. A letter I wasn't sure I could ever read out loud. The next weekends blurred into a gentle rhythm. Damien arrived every Friday evening with the same small duffel and the same quiet smile that grew a little wider each time. We cooked, we talked until the early hours. We left the journal open on the table like Theo was simply late coming home. One Sunday in late autumn, he showed up carrying a medium-sized cardboard box sealed with old packing tape. He set it on the kitchen counter like it might explode. "I found this in the very back of Dad's closet," he said. "I haven't opened it yet. I wanted us to do it together." My heart began to race. I knew Theo's handwriting on the faded label. "For Nora and Damien, only if you're ready." We carried the box to the living room floor and sat cross-legged like children. Inside were hundreds of photographs, Polaroids, printed emails, birthday cards we'd given him, even movie stubs from nights the three of us went to the cinema. But at the very bottom, wrapped in a soft cotton handkerchief, lay a thick envelope addressed to me in Theo's unmistakable script. "To my sister, read when you're no longer afraid to feel everything." Damien looked at me. "Do you want me to step outside?" I shook my head. "Stay." I opened it with shaking fingers. "Nora, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I never found the courage to say these things while I could still look you in the eye. You were the heart of us, always. When Mom was sick, when Dad left, when I fell apart after my divorce, you held the pieces together and never asked for anything back. I watched you give and give until there was almost nothing left for yourself, and I let my pride keep me from saying thank you. I'm sorry. I need you to know something important. After Damien was born, I was terrified I'd be a cold father like ours had been. So I made a promise the day he came home from the hospital. If anything ever happened to me, I wanted you to be the one who finished raising him, not just as an aunt, but as the mother, friend, home, everything he might need. I wrote it in my will, but I was too much of a coward to ever tell you while I was alive. I was wrong to keep it secret. Forgive me, and forgive yourself for anything you think you did wrong. You never failed us. You were the best of us. All my love, always, Theo." The paper shook so hard in my hands that Damien gently took it from me. He read in silence, lips trembling, then folded me into his arms and held me while years of unshed grief finally poured out. When the tears slowed, he rested his forehead against mine. "He wanted you to be my mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "And you already were. You always were." I couldn't speak. I just held him tighter. Later, when the light had gone soft and golden, Damien stood and walked to the window. "I've been thinking," he said, turning back to me. "I'm going to sell my apartment in the city. It's too far. I want to move closer. Maybe even into the guest room for a while, if that's okay. I don't want weekends anymore. I want every day with you." My heart swelled so big I thought it might burst. But before I could answer, he crossed the room, knelt in front of me, and took both my hands. "There's one more thing in the box." He reached in and pulled out a tiny velvet pouch. Inside was a simple silver ring, a woman's ring with a small sapphire in the center. On the inside band was engraved, "Nora and Theo, 1987. "It was Mom's," he said softly. "Dad kept it all these years. He wrote on the last page of the journal that if we ever found our way back to each other, he wanted me to give it to you. A promise that you were never alone." He slipped it onto my right hand. It fit perfectly. That night we fell asleep on the couch under the day. Same blanket, the ring glinting in the firelight, the photographs spread around us like stars. But the very last surprise was still waiting, tucked inside the velvet pouch, folded so small I almost missed it. A single sentence in Theo's handwriting. "Tell Damien the truth about the night he was born." I froze. Damien was already asleep against my shoulder, breathing slow and trusting. I stared at those words until dawn crept through the curtains. How could I tell him? Morning light slipped through the curtains and painted soft gold across Damien's sleeping face. He looked so young like this, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen since he was small. The note burned in my palm. "Tell Damien the truth about the night he was born." I had carried that secret for 29 years. Theo had begged me to carry it with him. Now the weight felt unbearable. Damien stirred, opened his eyes, and smiled sleepily. "Morning, Nora." The words sounded different now, softer, like it had always belonged to us. I took the tiny paper from my pocket and handed it to him. "There's one last thing." He read it once, then again. His brow creased. He looked up. "What does he mean?" I breathed in the scent of coffee and autumn air, and the faint trace of his cologne that had already started to feel like home. Then I told him everything. "The night you were born, your mother didn't make it to the hospital in time. Your mom went into labor early. Theo was on a work trip 3 hours away. I was the only one there. You came so fast the doctors barely caught you, and when they placed you in my arms first, you stopped crying. You looked right at me with those big eyes and grabbed my finger like you already knew me." Your mom was exhausted, smiling through tears. She whispered, "He's perfect." Then she closed her eyes and didn't open them again. Massive hemorrhage. They couldn't save her. Theo arrived an hour later. He fell apart in the hallway. He held me, and begged me never to tell you that the first face you ever looked for wasn't his. He was terrified you'd feel abandoned by her, or by him for not being there. He wanted you to believe you were born into his arms. I promised I'd keep the story simple. I promised him I'd keep you. Damien's tears fell silently. "So the first heartbeat you ever heard was yours against mine?" I nodded, unable to speak. He reached out and touched my cheek, the way a child reaches for his mother. Then he leaned forward and rested his forehead against mine. "Thank you for being my first home," he whispered. "And for being my last one, too." We stayed like that until the sun was high. No more walls, no more silences. That afternoon we took the box of photographs, the journal, the ring, and the tiny note, and we walked to the backyard where the old oak had watched us grow up. We dug a small hole beneath its roots and buried the last of the secrets. Not to hide them, but to let them, to grow into something new. We planted tulip bulbs on top, the kind that come back every single spring, no matter how harsh the winter. Damien moved in the following month. He took the guest room, then quietly turned it into his own. We turned Theo's old study into a library where we now leave the journal open on the desk, pages free for new entries, new memories. Some nights we sit on the porch with tea and watch the stars. Some mornings we burn the toast and laugh too loud. We argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes and whose music is worse. We are ordinary, perfect things, and every time he calls me Mom now, he does it softly, like a prayer he's still learning. And every time I answer, my heart finally feels the size it was always meant to be. Healing didn't come in one dramatic moment. It came in burnt toast, in shared blankets, in the way he saves the last sip of coffee for me, in the way I still reach to brush his hair from his eyes when he's thinking too hard. It came when we stopped running from the past and started walking through it, hand in hand. So if you're carrying a silence that's lasted too long, if there's a phone call you've been afraid to make it. The person on the other end might be waiting to hear your voice more than you'll ever know. Because sometimes the family we're born into is only the beginning, and the family we choose, the one we fight to keep, is the one that saves us in the end. Word count 800. Thank you for walking this entire journey with us. If it touched even a corner of your heart, please like, share with someone who might need it, and subscribe. Every click truly does help these real stories find the people who need them most. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. See you in the next one.